When 12-year-old Aiden was sent to live with his aunt for the summer, he didn't expect much to change. His parents had to travel abroad for work, and they assured him that his cousin, Clara, would keep him company. Clara was 16, older, louder, and always seemed to have a smile on her face when adults were watching. But from the first evening in her house, Aiden sensed something was wrong. Clara greeted him with a tight hug in front of their aunt, whispering, "We're going to have so much fun, little cousin." But as soon as the adults left the room, her grip tightened and her smile turned sharp. "Listen carefully," she whispered. "While you're here, you do what I say. If you don't, you'll regret it." Aiden froze. He thought she was joking, but the look in her eyes wasn't playful. It was threatening. The first few days were quiet. Clara acted sweet in front of her mother, laughing with Aiden at dinner, helping him with chores, even walking him to the park. But when no one was around, her behavior changed. She mocked him, calling him names, ordering him around like a servant. "Get me water," she'd snap. "Clean my shoes." If he hesitated, she pinched his arm hard or pulled his hair until he obeyed. At night, when Aiden lay in bed, he thought of calling his parents. But he didn't want to worry them. He told himself it wasn't so bad, that maybe Clara was just teasing. But the fear in his chest said otherwise. Things escalated quickly. One afternoon, when their aunt went shopping, Clara locked the doors and cornered Aiden in the living room. "You're so weak," she hissed. "You'll never tell anyone because they'd never believe you. Everyone thinks I'm perfect." Then she shoved him, harder than ever before, making him stumble and hit his arm against the table. Tears filled Aiden's eyes, but he stayed silent. He knew Clara was right. If he told their aunt, she'd probably smile and say, "Clara would never do that." Clara had everyone fooled. But what Clara didn't know was that Aiden's aunt had grown suspicious for her own reasons. Weeks before Aiden arrived, she had noticed Clara's temper, slamming doors, muttering angrily, being unusually secretive. The aunt dismissed it at first as teenage mood swings, but something inside her warned her to be cautious. Without telling Clara, she installed a small security camera in the living room, hidden between books on the shelf. She only meant it to keep an eye on her daughter's behavior when she wasn't home. She never imagined it would capture something darker. The day Clara shoved Aiden, the camera recorded everything. Her cruel words, his fearful silence, the way she smirked after hurting him. That evening, their aunt came home to find Clara cheerful, serving snacks and chatting as though nothing had happened. Aiden stayed quiet as usual, but when his aunt later checked the footage on her phone, what she saw made her heart drop. Her daughter, the girl she raised, the one neighbors praised as polite and well-mannered, was tormenting her cousin in secret. The aunt couldn't believe it. She watched the video 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. But the evidence was undeniable. Clara wasn't just being mean. She was abusing her cousin, using fear to control him. The next morning, their aunt decided not to confront Clara immediately. She wanted to be sure this wasn't an isolated incident. She left the camera running, this time paying close attention. And what unfolded over the next few days shocked her even more. Clara yelled at Aiden when he made the slightest mistake. She shoved him if he didn't move fast enough. She whispered cruel things into his ear, calling him worthless. Once, she even locked him in the closet for half an hour, laughing when he begged to be let out. Every moment was caught on camera. Every cruel word, every shove, every tear Aiden wiped away. By the end of the week, the aunt's hands shook as she watched. She realized she couldn't stay silent, but she also knew confronting Clara without proof would lead to denial, lies, and possibly more abuse in secret. The hidden camera had given her the truth, but now she had to decide how to use it. Aiden, meanwhile, continued to shrink into himself, trying to survive the summer. He had no idea his suffering had been witnessed, recorded, and preserved. He didn't know that soon everything would change. Because secrets have a way of coming to light, and Clara's secret was about to explode in front of everyone. The morning after reviewing the footage, Aiden's aunt sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched, as the images replayed in her mind. Clara's cruel grin, Aiden's frightened eyes. It didn't feel real. How could her sweet daughter, the one neighbors praised for being respectful and polite, behave like that when no one was watching? But denial couldn't erase the evidence. The camera didn't lie. She knew she had to act, but part of her heart ached at the thought. Clara was her child. She loved her deeply, and she wanted to believe there was still good in her. At the same time, Aiden was just a boy, innocent and trusting, sent into her care. She couldn't allow him to continue suffering. By the time Clara came down for breakfast, smiling brightly, the aunt had already made her decision. She wouldn't accuse Clara outright. Instead, she would set a trap. She would gather undeniable proof, enough that Clara couldn't twist the story or make excuses. That afternoon, she told the children she needed to visit a neighbor and would be gone for an hour. "Clara, keep an eye on Aiden, please," she said sweetly, giving no hint of her plan. Clara nodded with an angelic smile. But hidden in the living room behind the curtain, another camera had been placed, this time angled directly toward where Clara usually cornered Aiden. The aunt left quietly, her heart pounding, then drove only a few streets away. On her phone, she opened the live feed. At first, everything seemed normal. Clara and Aiden sat on the couch watching TV, but within minutes, Clara's mask slipped. She grabbed the remote from Aiden's hands. "Don't touch what's mine," she snapped. Aiden shrank back. "I was just changing the channel." Clara leaned close, her face inches from his. "You do not speak unless I tell you to. Got it." Her hand shot out and pinched his arm so hard that Aiden winced in pain. Clara laughed softly. "See, you're nothing. No one will ever believe you if you tell. Auntie loves me. You're just a guest." The aunt's chest tightened as she watched from her car. Her worst fears were confirmed. She fought the urge to drive back immediately. She needed more. She needed to see just how far Clara would go. Over the next half hour, Clara continued her cruel games. She ordered Aiden to clean up crumbs she had thrown on the floor. She made him stand in the corner, forbidding him to sit. When he hesitated, she pushed him roughly, muttering insults under her breath. And then came the breaking point. Clara grabbed Aiden's notebook from the table and began tearing pages out one by one. "Your drawings are ugly. Look at this trash. You think anyone cares about what you do? You're pathetic." Aiden tried to grab it back, his voice trembling. "Please, Clara, don't." But Clara shoved him down, towering over him. "Say please again. Beg me, maybe I'll stop." Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Please." The aunt couldn't bear it anymore. She slammed her car door shut and sped home, fury rising in her chest. When she walked through the front door, Clara instantly straightened, putting on her sweet smile. "Oh, hi, Mom, we were just..." "Enough," the aunt snapped, her voice shaking with anger. "I saw everything." Clara froze, her face pale. What do you mean?" "I mean the camera," her mother said firmly. "The one you didn't know about. I saw what you did to Aiden. Every word, every shove, every tear." For the first time, Clara looked terrified. "No, Mom, it's not what it looks like. I was just playing." "Playing?" the aunt shouted. "Hurting him, making him beg. Do you call that playing?" Aiden sat silently on the couch, his small hands trembling. He looked between them, unsure what would happen next. The aunt's eyes burned with both anger and heartbreak. "Clara, you are my daughter, but what you've done is cruel. You betrayed my trust, and worse, you've hurt your cousin who did nothing to you." Clara opened her mouth, but no excuse came. The fear in her eyes said she knew she'd been caught. The aunt turned to Aiden, her voice softening. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, sweetheart. I believe you. I saw it all." Tears rolled down Aiden's cheeks. Not just of sadness, but of relief. For the first time all summer, he felt safe. But the aunt also knew this was only the beginning. Clara's behavior wasn't a simple mistake. It was a dangerous pattern. Something darker lived beneath her daughter's smile, and now it was exposed. The hidden camera had captured the truth, and the truth demanded consequences. That night, the house was filled with silence. Clara locked herself in her room, her face red with shame and anger. Aiden stayed close to his aunt, still shaken. And the aunt sat awake, torn between love for her daughter and the responsibility to protect her nephew. She had the proof. Now she had to decide what to do with it. Because if Clara could hurt her cousin like this, who else might she hurt in the future? The next morning, the house felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of the secret. Aiden avoided Clara, keeping close to his aunt's side. Clara barely came out of her room, and when she did, she wore a mask of silence. No more sweet smiles, no more sharp whispers, but her eyes burned with a mixture of anger and fear. Aiden's aunt spent the day pacing, torn between emotions. She was furious at Clara for what she had done, heartbroken for Aiden, and terrified of what might happen if the truth came out in the wrong way. But she knew one thing with certainty: this couldn't stay hidden. That evening, she picked up the phone and called Aiden's parents. Her voice trembled as she explained everything: the suspicions, the hidden camera, the footage. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Aiden's mother whispered, "Bring us the proof. We need to see it for ourselves." The aunt agreed. A family meeting was arranged for the weekend. Clara would have to face everyone. When Saturday came, the living room filled with tense faces. Aiden's parents sat close together, holding his small hands. The aunt stood in front of the television, remote in hand, her heart pounding. Clara sat stiffly in the corner, arms crossed, glaring at the floor. The aunt spoke first. "What I'm about to show you is not easy, but it must be seen. Aiden has suffered in silence, and I let myself be blind. That ends today." She pressed play. The screen lit up with the recording. Clara's voice filled the room, sharp and cruel. "You're nothing. No one will ever believe you." Everyone watched as she pinched Aiden, shoved him, tore his drawings, and laughed at his tears. Aiden's mother gasped, covering her mouth. His father clenched his fists, his face pale with rage. "That's my son," he whispered, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Aiden looked down at his lap, ashamed, though he had done nothing wrong. Tears welled in his eyes. His secret, the one he had been too afraid to tell, was now exposed to everyone. When the video ended, the room was silent, heavy with shock. Clara finally broke it, her voice shaking but defensive. "It's not what it looks like. I was just teasing him. He's too sensitive." "Teasing?" Aiden's father thundered, standing so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. "You call this teasing? You call making a child beg, locking him in a closet, and breaking him down teasing?" Clara's face turned red. "You don't understand. Everyone always pays attention to him because he's younger. No one ever notices me. I just wanted him to know how it feels." Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. "Enough, Clara." Clara flinched. The aunt's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know how it feels to watch your own child on a screen, tormenting someone who trusted you? Do you know what it does to me, Clara? I raised you to be kind, to be strong. And this is cruelty." Clara's lip trembled. For the first time, she didn't have a quick excuse. She shrank back into her seat, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Aiden's mother pulled her son close, kissing the top of his head. "We sent him here because we trusted you," she whispered to her sister. "We thought he'd be safe, but look at what happened." The aunt's voice shook. "I failed him, but I promise you I will make this right. She will face consequences." Clara's father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His deep voice was heavy with disappointment. "Clara, what you've done is not just misbehavior. It is abuse. If the camera had not caught you, no one would have believed Aiden. You used that against him, and that makes it worse." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." But Aiden, small and trembling, finally lifted his head. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room. "Yes, you did. You told me no one would believe me. You made me feel like I didn't matter." The words struck Clara harder than any adult's anger. For the first time, she saw the pain she had caused reflected in Aiden's face. The room remained silent as the weight of his words settled. Finally, Aiden's father spoke. "This cannot be ignored. Clara needs help, but more than that, Aiden needs healing. He needs to know he is safe." The aunt nodded. "She will face punishment. She will go to counseling. And I will not leave her alone with him or anyone until I know she has changed. I will not protect her from the truth." Clara buried her face in her hands, crying silently. For the first time, she realized her secret power had been stripped away. The hidden camera had seen everything. Her mask had fallen. That night, Aiden went to bed in his parents' arms, feeling safe for the first time in weeks. Clara stayed locked in her room, her cries muffled behind the door, and the aunt sat alone in the living room, staring at the camera that had revealed everything. She had uncovered the truth, but exposing it was only the beginning, because the damage had already been done, and the family would never be the same again. The morning after the family meeting, Clara's world felt like it had collapsed. She stayed locked in her room, her pillow wet from tears. Gone was the confidence she had worn like armor, the cruel smirk that had given her power over Aiden. Now every time she closed her eyes, she heard his small voice saying, "You made me feel like I didn't matter." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the adults sat together, exhausted but determined. Aiden ate quietly beside his parents, his shoulders hunched. His aunt's heart ached watching him. He still looked scared, as if Clara might appear at any moment. "We can't just let this pass," Aiden's father said firmly. "What Clara did wasn't mischief, it was abuse. There must be consequences." The aunt nodded, her face pale but resolute. "I know. I won't cover for her. If I pretend this is just a phase, she'll do worse one day. I've already spoken to a counselor who specializes in adolescent behavior. Clara will start sessions immediately, and at home there will be strict rules." "What kind of rules?" Aiden's mother asked cautiously. The aunt took a deep breath. "She will have no phone, no computer, no outings with friends until she earns back trust. She will do community service with me every weekend, and she will apologize, not just to Aiden, but to all of us." Aiden's father crossed his arms. "That's a start, but what about now? How can Aiden feel safe while still under the same roof as her?" Silence fell. Everyone looked at Aiden, who kept staring at his plate. Then in a small voice he whispered, "I don't want to be alone with her." The aunt's eyes filled with tears. "You won't be, Aiden, I promise you. From this moment on, she will never be left alone with you." That evening, the aunt knocked on Clara's door. "Clara," she said firmly, "come out. We need to talk." Slowly, Clara emerged, her face blotchy from crying. She avoided everyone's gaze, shuffling into the living room like a prisoner awaiting judgment. Her mother's voice was calm but cold. "Clara, we have decided your punishment. You will attend counseling twice a week. You will have no phone, no computer, no privileges until you show real change. You will do community service with me, and you will apologize to Aiden face to face." Clara's lip trembled. "But Mom, no excuses," her mother cut her off. "This is not negotiable." Clara turned her eyes to Aiden, who sat nervously on the couch. For the first time, she saw him not as someone weaker than her, but as someone she had truly hurt. The shame was unbearable. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her father's voice hardened. "Louder, Clara, mean it." Clara swallowed, tears running down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Aiden, for everything. For calling you names, for hurting you, for making you feel worthless. I was wrong." Aiden stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to forgive, but another part still carried the fear. Finally, he nodded slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Over the next few days, the punishment became reality. Clara's phone was taken away. Her friends messaged, wondering why she wasn't online, but she had no way to answer. She scrubbed floors and washed dishes, her mother watching closely. Every Saturday, she was dragged to a local shelter, helping serve meals to people in need. At first, she sulked and complained, but slowly, the reality of her actions began to sink in. The counseling sessions were the hardest. The counselor didn't let her hide behind excuses. "Why did you hurt Aiden?" she asked again and again, until Clara finally admitted the truth. "I felt invisible," she whispered one afternoon. "Everyone always praised me for being polite, but inside I was angry. And when Aiden came, so sweet and innocent, I wanted to crush him. I wanted someone to feel smaller than I did." The counselor nodded. "That anger is yours to deal with, Clara, but you chose to put it on someone else. Until you learn healthier ways to handle it, you will always hurt the people closest to you." Those words cut deep. For the first time, Clara realized the depth of her cruelty. It wasn't just about Aiden, it was about her own brokenness. Meanwhile, Aiden slowly began to heal. He spent more time with his parents, who reassured him daily that he was loved and believed. He started drawing again, this time without fear of his pages being torn. His aunt made a point to praise him, to remind him that his voice mattered. But the scars remained. Some nights, Aiden woke crying, remembering Clara's whispers, "No one will ever believe you." It would take time before he fully trusted again. The hidden camera had caught Clara's cruelty. The punishment had begun. But for the family, the road ahead was long. One evening, as Clara sat silently at the dinner table, her aunt looked at her and said softly, "Clara, the camera showed us the truth, but only you can decide what happens next. You can keep being the girl in those videos, or you can choose to change. The choice is yours." Clara lowered her head. For the first time, she wanted to change, not because of punishment, but because she couldn't bear to see Aiden's eyes filled with fear again. Weeks passed, and the house slowly returned to a fragile kind of normal. Clara was quieter than ever. She went to her counseling sessions, kept up with her chores, and followed every rule without complaint. The girl who once sneered and mocked now moved like a shadow, keeping her distance from everyone. But for Aiden, the wound was still fresh. Though Clara no longer dared to hurt him, he couldn't erase the memories. The dark whispers, the cruel laughter, the feeling of being trapped. These things followed him even in his sleep. One night, his mother woke to his terrified cries. She rushed into his room to find him trembling under the blanket. "It's okay, Aiden," she whispered, holding him close. "You're safe. No one can hurt you anymore." But Aiden clung to her and whispered back, "What if she does it again when no one's looking?" The words shattered her heart. She realized forgiveness would not come easily. Trust, once broken, takes a long time to mend. The next day, the aunt gathered the children in the living room. She wanted to bridge the gap. "Aiden," she said gently, "Clara has been trying to change. I know you're scared, but maybe one day you can forgive her." Clara sat on the far end of the couch, twisting her fingers nervously. "I really am sorry," she whispered again, her voice cracking. "I can't take back what I did, but I'll never hurt you again. I promise." Aiden stared at her. For a moment, he wanted to believe her. But then a memory flashed, her laughing as she locked him in the closet, her voice hissing, "No one cares about you." His chest tightened and he shook his head. "I can't," he whispered before running to his room. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had expected punishment, anger, even hatred. But the rejection, the knowledge that Aiden couldn't forgive her, cut deeper than anything else. At her next counseling session, she confessed, "He hates me. No matter what I do, he'll never trust me again." The counselor leaned forward. "Clara, forgiveness is not something you can demand. It's something you earn over time. Right now, Aiden doesn't feel safe. Your job is not to make him forgive you. It's to prove through your actions that you've changed. That takes patience." Clara nodded slowly, realizing for the first time that this wasn't about her pain. It was about his healing. Back at home, Clara began trying in small ways. When Aiden dropped his crayons, she picked them up without a word. When he wanted to watch cartoons, she didn't complain. Once, when he tripped in the yard, she reached out to help him up. But Aiden always hesitated. He took the crayons with suspicious eyes, sat stiffly during cartoons, and brushed the dirt off his knees himself. Every time she tried, his silence reminded her that forgiveness was still far away. One Sunday afternoon, the family visited the park. Children laughed on the swings, couples strolled hand in hand, and sunlight bathed the grass. Clara sat on a bench, watching Aiden play near the sandbox. Suddenly, a group of older kids approached him. "What's wrong, little boy?" One sneered. "Why are you playing alone?" Another shoved his toy truck into the sand. Aiden froze, his chest tightening with the same fear he had felt with Clara. Without thinking, Clara jumped up and stormed over. "Leave him alone," she shouted. The boys laughed at her, but Clara stood her ground, her fists clenched. I said, leave him alone. The older kids muttered insults but eventually backed off, wandering away. Aiden stood frozen, staring at Clara. His eyes were wide, confused. This was not the cousin who had tormented him before. Clara knelt beside him. "They won't bother you again," she said softly. "Not while I'm here." Aiden didn't answer, but later that evening, as the family drove home, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. For the first time in weeks, his gaze wasn't filled with fear, but with cautious curiosity. That night, he approached his mother quietly. "Mom," he whispered, "Clara helped me today. She didn't let those boys hurt me." His mother stroked his hair. "Sometimes people make mistakes, Aiden, big mistakes, but sometimes they try to make things right." Aiden thought about that for a long time. He still wasn't ready to forgive, but a tiny seed of doubt had been planted in his heart. Maybe Clara really was changing. Meanwhile, Clara sat awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she didn't feel like a monster or a victim. She felt something different, hope. She couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could build a different future. Months had passed since the hidden camera revealed the truth. The family had endured nights of tears, endless discussions, and the heavy silence that comes after betrayal. Slowly, though, a new rhythm formed. Aiden no longer lived in constant fear. Clara no longer wore the mask of arrogance, and the aunt no longer turned a blind eye. But the deepest wound still lingered, the question of forgiveness. One evening, as the autumn wind rattled the windows, the aunt gathered everyone in the living room. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, and the glow of the lamp made the room feel warm despite the tension. "I called us together," she said gently, "because we've all been carrying this weight. Aiden, Clara, your story isn't over yet. We must face it together." Aiden sat curled up next to his mother, clutching a small stuffed bear. Clara sat across the room, her hands shaking in her lap. She had spent months in counseling, serving food at the shelter, and trying in small ways to rebuild trust. But she knew this moment would decide everything. The aunt looked at Clara first. "Clara, you've admitted your mistakes. You've worked hard to change, but today I want you to speak, not to me, not to your counselor, to Aiden." Clara's throat tightened. She turned to her cousin, who avoided her eyes. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Aiden," she whispered, then cleared her throat. "Aiden, I hurt you. I hurt you in ways no one ever should. I called you names, I scared you, I made you feel small. And when you tried to speak up, I silenced you. I stole your trust. I can't take back what I did, and I don't deserve forgiveness just because I want it. But I promise you, every day from now on, I'll spend proving that I will never hurt you again. Not you, not anyone." Her voice broke and she wiped her tears. "I thought power came from making others feel weak, but I was wrong. Real strength comes from protecting, not destroying. And I want to be strong in the right way." The room was silent. All eyes turned to Aiden. He gripped his bear tightly, his little chest rising and falling. He remembered the nights locked in the dark, the cruel whispers, the tears no one had seen. But he also remembered the park when Clara stood up to the bullies. He remembered how she had picked up his crayons, how she had left his drawings untouched. Slowly, he raised his head. His voice was small but steady. "You hurt me, you made me think no one would ever believe me, and I hated you for that." His eyes glistened with tears. "But yesterday, when you helped me with my school project, I didn't feel scared. And at the park, you didn't laugh, you helped me. I don't know if I can forget what you did, but I think I can try to forgive you someday." Clara gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Tears spilled freely down her face. It wasn't a full forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. It was a door cracked open. The aunt reached out, placing a hand on both of their shoulders. "This is what healing looks like. It's not easy and it's not fast, but you've both taken the first step." That night, for the first time, Aiden asked if Clara could read him a bedtime story. She froze at first, unsure if she had heard correctly. But when he repeated it, she nodded, her voice shaking. She sat on the edge of his bed, reading softly while he clutched his bear. It was a small act, but to both of them, it felt enormous. Days turned into weeks, and their bond slowly began to mend. Clara never forgot the cruelty she had shown. She carried it as a reminder, a scar of her past. But she used it to push herself forward, to become kinder, more patient, more protective. Aiden, too, grew braver. His drawings returned, brighter and more colorful than ever. He laughed more, slept more peacefully, and even started to believe in his own voice again. The hidden camera had revealed the darkest truth. It had torn the family apart. But in the end, it also became the reason they rebuilt. Stronger, more honest, and closer than before. One evening, months later, Aiden handed Clara a picture he had drawn. It showed two figures holding hands under a bright sun. Above them, in clumsy letters, he had written, "Family." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him tightly. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the villain of the story. She felt like someone who had been given a second chance. And this time, she would not waste it.